Alrighty, Aphrodite. This is a good one. This is a very good lesson. I mean, they're all good, let's be honest. But this one is going to be a longerish one. But the idea behind it is that this lesson is all about the fourth and fifth component here. Okay, the reason I'm doing these together is that I think this is going to focus mainly on number 5, which is the writing of your actual research report. So what we're going to look at today is some examples of different paragraphs of really good research reports. But as we do it, I'm going to be talking to and pointing out, sound very ochre there, pointing out where people have looked at cultural difference and change over time within their own paragraph. So we're sort of going to be mushing the two together. I'm also really going to break down this concept here that we look at in the marking criteria, where we're looking at synthesis, what that looks like and how we can identify it within our own writing. Okay, so there'll be a little bit to today, and we're going to be analysing a few different scaffolds here as well. So to start us off, we're going to start here with a social research and report writing guide. So I have created this structure called OSAE. Right, you guys have access to this on Google Classroom, and a copy was handed out to you when you received your assessment task notification. If you're away or you didn't get one, make sure you see the teacher for that while I'm away. So the social research and report writing, again, this is just a structure I've made up. Now, I'm not saying if you use a different writing structure or that you don't use this, you'll get bad marks. That's not the case at all. You can use whatever thing you like, but this will ensure, if you use it, that you will write killer paragraphs. They'll have a really clear argument, they'll have in-depth synthesis of ideas, it'll have good analysis, and you'll be able to evaluate your work at the end of it. So using this is a really good idea. If you're looking at, again, that A range, it's really important that you have good structure to your writing, okay? And I want you to know that by following this, and if you do it well and consistently, you will probably get an A, because by applying this consistently, you are applying the marking guidelines consistently, okay? You're demonstrating thorough and sustained syllabus, you're making informed judgments, so you're evaluating, you're analysing, you're synthesizing. So if you follow it, you should get an A, and you do it really well. Alright. So with that out of the way, report writing is a little different to essay writing. It's not as direct and concise that we've looked at in term 1. However, you still need to make sure that your writing flows logically and that you don't waffle on, okay? In report writing, you have license to be a bit more creative with your writing style and weave your own voice into your report, so to speak. But you've still got to have a good solid structure. So with this in mind, this is where OSAE comes from, and especially if you're kind of aiming for that big band 6 next year, or the A range here, the ability to synthesize, analyze, and evaluate is very critical to this process. So I'll break it down here for you. So I'll zoom in. The first one is outline. So I would encourage you to get this sheet of paper out in front of you to work with me, and you can make annotations as you go. If you want, you can use it on the sheets that you have, but also this appears in your skills booklet. So it might even be a better idea to use that, because that is something that you will take with you into year 12. So if you guys want to use your big boy book to do it, your big brain booklet, which is page 26, please feel free to do that instead. Okay, back to this. So this is a color-coded system, and the reason it's color-coded is that when you guys write your own paragraphs, I get you guys to color-code your own paragraphs like this, so you can clearly see where you've outlined, synthesized, evaluated, etc. So that's the reason for the colors. You can use any colors you like, but these are the ones I've got printed out. So the first thing you want to do, right, so the first thing is outline. So this is where in your paragraph you are introducing your main argument by making a clear point, underline clear point for the paragraph, and providing key ideas for your argument. Okay, that's the very first thing you should be doing in any statement. You then want to directly relate your research inquiry, well, it should be directly related to your research, by using language that addresses the question/verb that you're looking at. Now, in terms of that, that's addressing your research question, and the verb being, I guess, the focus question that you've designed for that particular bit of writing. The syllabus terminology and key concepts should also appear within this as well, because this being a society and culture paper, we want to make sure that we are constantly weaving and using course concepts and terminology where possible. Okay, so pretty straightforward. You're just outlining, talking about what you're going to talk about. Let's go down to our example here. Okay, so quickly, just a little bit of context. This research topic was looking at what's called the feminazi threat, contemporary aversion to feminism. So aversion means opposition. So this research project was looking at people who find feminists and they refer to them as feminazis because they don't like feminism, basically. Okay, so this paragraph, what we're looking for in the red is in introducing the main argument by making a clear point and providing key ideas and using key concepts and syllabus terminology. Okay? Now, these don't necessarily have to be one sentence each. They should never be just one sentence each. They should be more detailed and fleshed out than that. And you can see here that they're outlining their point in quite a bit of detail. Okay? And that's fine. It doesn't have to be this detailed necessarily, but it's there for us to look at. So the term feminazi originated in the 1990s with American radio personality Rush Limbaugh using it to describe his book, The Way Things Ought to Be, a feminist to whom the most important thing in life is ensuring that as many abortions as possible occur. Notably, the social paradigm of a woman exercising her reproductive choice over her body is seen to resonate with the anti-Semitic rigidity of Hitler that translated into millions of deaths of Jews, leading to the unfair characterization of feminists as destructive individuals and extremists. The sexist slur consequently leads to feminazis being characterized as extreme, left-wing, physically unattractive, acting collectively, and are consumed by ideology. It is used in society as a common form of rebuttal against women who are deemed to be outspoken about their views and beliefs. So, what this point is outlining very clearly is the main argument of this concept of a feminazi. We've got where it originated, and then in this outline statement, the author of this research report is giving us the idea that feminazis are characterized by this sort of description, okay, and then where it's used. So what I'm going to expect now is they've clearly outlined what this paragraph is going to be about. They're going to be unpacking this concept of feminazi and talking a bit more about the characteristics behind it, okay, and its impact on views and beliefs in society. So that's sort of the key message that I'm getting here. It's very clear to me that that's what they're talking about. So that's, I guess, a modeled version. Let's look at a different example, okay? This particular topic is looking at the concept of sexism and racism in Disney movies, okay? We'll look at another example to try and cement this, okay? So over time, so we want to be looking at course concepts, we want to be finding out what it is that they're about to talk about. It's got to be really clear. So over time, so we've got one concept there already, Disney has socially constructed, at a macro level, image for young girls to strive for, the Disney princess. During what is referred to as the classical era of Disney films, the role of mythology has created and perpetuated adverse stereotypes that white women are reliant on men, domesticated, a lack of power and authority, and are portrayed with over-sexualized body features. This appearance depicted on screen generates a problematic image for how women should both look and act. So this is a really clear outline statement that I've got here. So you would highlight this in red, okay? I'll give you a chance to do that now, okay? And we'll just keep working through this example, okay? Because it's a topic everyone knows about, is Disney. So here we've got a lot of concepts that we can see: time, social construction, macro level. We have gender throughout in terms of men, women, girls. We've got the word stereotypes, power and authority. So we've got a lot of core concepts, but course terminology as well, okay? It's clear to me here as well that if we're looking at something like a cross-cultural or cultural difference component, it's really clear here that this person is looking at gender because they're comparing men and women, right? So that's a point of comparison there. Now this research report's looking at sexism and racism, so there's sort of a double entendre of cultural comparison there, but for the purpose of this, we'll continue to move forward. So the clear point of this paragraph is very much established, that the idea that Disney has socially constructed what women should look like, okay, through this concept of a Disney princess, okay? So as I read further into this paragraph, I should start to see that idea become more fleshed out, okay? So highlight that red, we'll go back up and read what we do next. So that's your outline statement, right? The next step along this is a synthesize, okay? So this is where you synthesize your primary research methodologies and your secondary data together to create new meaning, to explore ideas in your paragraph, okay? You must use synthesis, language, and transition statements. Bold that, underline that, highlight that. That is super important. And as we read the Disney example, we'll look at those synthesized statements and that really strong transition language there as well. You should also integrate your cross-cultural perspectives and your change over time and relevant course concepts. So here, this is where you'll be looking at those components of change over time and your cultural difference as well, okay? And I think the last thing with synthesizing, if we're looking at a pro tip, is that we want to aim for at least 3 pieces of information of primary, secondary research combined, okay? That's what we call the triangulation of research, okay? So the idea in the triangle, if I draw a really poor triangle, hold on. This would be much easier if I had a board, but here's our triangle. Right. So the triangulation of research is the idea that you will refer to a primary source, okay? Let's say you're making a point, and the point here was about Disney princesses' social construction, yeah? So when we synthesize, we want to provide a piece of primary research, we then want to provide a piece of secondary research, and then we want to provide a third point, which is either another primary or another secondary research. So what that does is that is synthesis, okay? When you're looking at 3 or more things, 3 or more bits of research to explore an idea, that is when you're synthesizing multiple points at the same time. Now, times 3 should be the minimum. If you want to do more than that, by all means, you know, you could do primary and then give us a qualitative, and quantitative bit of primary data, okay? You might look at questionnaire and then an interview and then your content analysis. So, sorry, really bad writing here. So that's, if I do that, that's 1, 2 bits of research there already. If I compare that with 2 secondary research articles, I've already hit 4. If I then triangulate that again with something else, and so on and so forth. So you can see that when we're looking at synthesis, at least 3 bits of a mixture of primary and secondary is important. More is a bit better. Like, don't do like 10, don't go crazy, but like 3 to 4 is a good spot, okay? If we look at this Disney example again, we've done our outline statement, so we know exactly, what it is that we're going to be looking for here. Now we have to find out the synthesis part, okay? So we're going to be looking out for integration of research, synthesis statements, and cross-cultural perspectives and change over time, okay? That's what we're looking for. So this is evident when transition statement, boom, that's beautiful. We love that, okay? Examining Disney films over time, such as Snow White, Cinderella, and Little Mermaid. What we have here is that we have weaved our change over time. Okay, so we're looking at time as a concept here, so that's really good. So you can see how that's starting to integrate in here. In which Walwyn asserts, so we're referring to secondary research, the protagonist 20, oops, that's an old footnote, so we'll get rid of that. In which he asserts the protagonist only wins if she's attracted to a powerful male hero. Okay, so we've even got the concept of gender coming through here as our culture comparison as well. Now, you guys should be annotating this as I talk. You can pause me, speed me up, slow me down, whatever you got to do. But make sure you're annotating this on the side, okay? So we've got examples of time, okay? We've got the cross-cultural comparison coming in, which is really good. And we've also got some secondary research here and a transition statement. So when we unpack this one sentence, there's a lot happening here, and that's really good, and we want to see that. But we need triangulation of research, right? So let's see if they continue doing it. This is reflected in my content analysis. Boom. So that's a strong synthesis statement that we're looking and using here. This is reflected in my content analysis of the aforementioned films, in which I made qualitative judgments, so, you know, embedding course terminology here, on how each princess's identity, boom, concept is constructed, boom, around her usefulness to males. For example, in Snow White, she is seen as a domesticated, tentative to the needs of men, and shows great enthusiasm for cleaning their cottage. Further, Cinderella's role as a maid remained kind, gentle, and servile, desperately waiting for a man to save her. It was also noted that Cinderella had to undergo a physical transformation to become beautiful and physically desirable enough to attract attention of a male, reinforcing the sexual objectification of women. Moreover, in The Little Mermaid, this role is constructed and reflected when Ariel chooses to lose her voice, lose her inheritance to a kingdom, and lose her ability just to impress a boy, of which she also undergoes physical change to conform to a man's standards of approval. So here, we have a really big section where a lot of content analysis is happening, and she's synthesizing, this student has synthesized their own primary data, okay? And that's important to do as well. However, we need a third point here, right? We've got primary data, we've got secondary data, we need that triangulation happening. What we've also got here, just as a side note, is really strong language. We have a lot of transition statements happening. For example, further, it is also noted that, moreover. So we're getting a lot of those synthesis joining phrases happening. What we then see in the next sentence is these notions and social constructions are depicted by Lewis as treating women as damsels in distress, waiting for a heroic knight to rescue them. So here we've got our third point here. This is our third bit of the triangulation happening. Okay, so we started off with secondary research from Walwyn. We then moved to primary research of a content analysis, and then we did some more secondary research here. So we can see a clear triangulation of research and synthesis has happened here. We've used really strong synthesis statements. This is reflected in my content analysis. This is evident when examining films over time. These notions are currently depicted by Lewis as this. So when they say Lewis and Walwyn, they're using the last name of the researcher that's done that. So you can use that if you want. Or you could say something like, these constructions are depicted by further secondary research, which asserts that. Or you might say, further research conducted by Harvard University, which states that blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that whole part here you should be highlighted in green. That's our synthesis, okay? So highlight that now. We've integrated primary and secondary research, tick, to further explore our main idea of the paragraph, which we note here was looking at the social construction of a Disney princess. So you can see that that synthesis relates to the point that they were making. They've used strong synthesis language and statements as well. I'm going to show you guys a bunch of lists, or a list of synthesis statements later as well, which will help you. And they've integrated across cultural perspective, which is your cultural difference, and change over time as well, which is really good. Okay, they've embedded concepts and done at least 3. Okay, so win, win, win. We're then going to look at the next component, which is analysis. Okay, so this is in blue. Feel free to pause me if you need a break, or whatever. This is good stuff. I'm just getting excited. So the third component of this paragraph structure is analysis. So this is where you look at the data, and based off the evidence, you interpret the meaning behind the data you have just synthesized. So you need to think about going deep in your analysis, moving beyond basic questions such as what, when, where, and who, towards the why. We want to find out why. So why does the data reveal this? Why do people take this perspective? Why is it that Disney is showing this form of females as the version of a Disney princess and what it should look like? Why are they doing that? Okay, so we're looking at the why. And when we analyze, here's our pro tip, we should aim to identify links between certain factors. Okay, underline that. So what are the links between certain factors, right? We then want to examine different viewpoints and find connections or even lack thereof in the data. So sometimes the fact that there's no connection between things can sort of speak loudly as well. The absence of something can speak to an issue as well. So let's look at this analysis, okay, that we have here. Upon analysis of my primary and secondary research, okay, so it's really clear and it's really obvious to me that this person is about to analyze their data. Don't be afraid to say things like that. It's actually really good. Like, explicit is good. So being explicit in your language is really good. So the fact that this person's literally said is indicating to me as a marker, I'm literally telling you I'm about to analyze my data, and then they do it. It's really clever. So upon analysis of my primary and secondary research, it's also synthesis-y language, which is good, and we like that. It is clear that, a good transition statement, the mythology, creation, and perpetuation, there was a little error there, I just fixed up. So, creation and perpetuation, that should say, of stereotypes, has adverse effects on young female consumers as it generates an image that women are reliant on men. So here where they've gone deep in their analysis, if this sentence just ended here, which sometimes it does for a lot of students that I've read, they don't go deep enough. If we just said, upon analysis, it is clear that mythology, creation and perpetuation of stereotypes has adverse effects on young female consumers. Full stop. It's not quite deep enough. I want you to give me more. And this is where we've done it. As it generates an image that women are reliant on men. Okay, so they're giving some justification and some reasoning. They're linking factors, like we said here. Okay, identifying the link between factors. They create this image that has bad effects because it portrays this thing that women should be reliant on men. Okay, now they're going to continue to analyze their data here and unpack it by referring to more data. So you can still, don't think that all your research has to sit in the synthesis realm. You can still use and reference secondary research when you are analyzing as well. In fact, you should do that. This is reflected in an interview from Angie Mooney, who's Disney's head of consumer division, where he exclaimed, "We give girls what they want." This has drawn criticism from further secondary research, which states it is difficult to ascertain where want ends and coercion begins. So we can see here that even upon their analysis of data, they're still synthesizing, which is really good to do. But what they've done is they've given the why, okay? So we got a little bit deeper here, where the reason that Disney do this, and we're talking about it generates an image that women are reliant on men, is that we have one quote here that it's giving girls what they want, based on an interview from the consumer division. And then we've also given, I guess, the counter argument to that in another sort of bit of secondary research. So we can see here that we've gone and delved deeper into the ideas and we've justified it, which is really important. And then based off this analysis, we have a great statement here. Therefore, it is evident that the contemporary values reflected in the classical era of Disney princess films perpetuates an identity for how women act, think, and feel. Okay, so we've analyzed our data here. Let's highlight it in blue. Boom. Based on the evidence we've provided, we interpreted the meaning behind the data. Okay, which is that women should be reliant on men and talk about how they act, think, and feel. Okay, that was the meaning behind the data that the researcher has interpreted based on the information that they have. Okay, so that's good. They then went very deep in their analysis and provided the why, and we can see that in this paragraph here. So that's a great example of analysis. What we then do is look at the final part of the puzzle, which is evaluate. So you've outlined your topic, you've made it really clear what you're going to talk about, you've given me some really good bits of data that unpacks that idea. You've then analysed that data, which is beautiful, I love it. And then the last thing we need to do is evaluate it, okay? So we have to make a judgment based on the analysis of this research and relate it back to your overarching topic. So this is where we need to evaluate. Now your evaluation should link back to your original statement. Now I'm not saying it has to be like word for word the same, but it needs to link back to the main idea because it should be reinforcing the main point of your paragraph, okay? That's what your evaluation does. You make a judgment based off your research and the analysis that you've done, and then link it back. So some things to consider to help you think, oh, well, how do I do that, sir? It's all well and good to say I need to make a judgment, but how do I actually do that? Think about these things, or ask yourself these questions. What does this reveal about your topic? So what does the analysis that you've just done reveal about your topic? So if we're looking at the Disney princess here, what does this concept that women need to be relied on by men, that Disney producers have clearly orchestrated and created, what does that reveal about our topic? What does that reveal about how Disney view women and view young women? What does it reveal about the message that they're sending to their audience? You know, does this has a positive or negative effect? Why not? How does it help you answer your focus question? Okay, so if you're looking at the contemporary issue of sexism within Disney films, right? How does this help answer your question on that? Okay, what effect does it have? So you need to make a judgment on that. A pro tip to help you do that is to use a strong verb to convey a strong evaluation. So that makes it clearer, more convincing, and a better articulated argument. So instead of saying this has a bad effect on young women who watch Disney princess movies, you should use a far stronger verb to convey that idea, such as this has a detrimental impact on the socialization and identity formative years of young women. Okay, that sounds heaps more punchy. It's a much stronger argument. It's used a strong verb to get a strong evaluation across. So that's a good pro tip. The second pro tip is that you should use your last sentence to segue to your next argument or your next paragraph. Unless, of course, this is the very last paragraph in your essay, then you skip that step. But if it's not, then you have a nice little segue to your next big idea, which will then lead into your next ASAE. Okay, so let's see how all of this unpacks in our Disney example again. Okay, so we're up to here. This has a negative impact on consumers, particularly young girls, as it creates a double standard that does not reinforce empowerment and autonomy for women to choose their own identity as it is afforded to males, but rather that it must be entwined with the identity of a male hero. This is a very strong judgment that we've made here. So if we look at that sentence here, we've used strong verbs to convey a strong evaluation. We've got things like it has a negative impact, creating a double standard. It does not reinforce empowerment. So it's really clear, it must be entwined with the identity of a male hero. So it's really clear here to the marker that they are making a judgment based off the analysis of their research that women should be reliant on men, or that Disney princesses are reliant on men. So we can see that they've made an evaluation. They've said it's bad, and they said why. So if they just said, so what some students do is say, this has a negative impact on consumers, and then they just leave it there. And it's like, no, you got to tell me why does it have a negative impact. It creates a double standard that does this. Okay, reinforces women that their fate must be entwined with the identity of a male hero. Okay, so we've got a really strong, clear judgment there. we've said it has a negative impact, we've said what it reveals about the topic, and it helps us answer our question on sexism in Disney films and the effect it has. Okay, beautiful, we love that. What we've then got as part of our evaluative statement is a good segue sentence to our next point. Although the evidence above reinforces and reflects past society's long-held views regarding women's reliance on men for success, contemporary Disney heroines are moving away from this trend and establishing that women can have an identity in their own right. So it's clear to me here that the next paragraph of this, they've got a nice little segue, is they're going to talk about more contemporary examples of Disney movies where heroines are not reliant on men. So what this does is we can see that they're going to talk about that change over time within their next paragraph. So if their next paragraph is then full of examples such as like Moana, Brave, Raya the Dragon, where you've got really strong, genuine female Disney princess protagonists, Frozen, for example, Elsa that is, we can see that over the course of the research project, they have talked about change over time because they're comparing old Disney movies to new Disney movies, and then that they're talking about the concept of gender throughout here as we go. Okay, so that's an example, and obviously highlight this yellow if you haven't already. So that's an example paragraph using the OSAE structure that you can see has made this a really good paragraph to write. The other thing I would like you guys to do, now that you've, I guess, unpacked that OSAE structure, you've got, read this in its entirety too, because this is a really good one too. Because what this one probably didn't have when we're talking about synthesis is it's all qualitative information here. There's no aspect of quantitative data here. Okay, so if we're critiquing this, whereas if we look at this one above us, we can see clearly that we're referring to some quantitative data in this paragraph, with 51% of female participants in my questionnaire have been called a feminazi, with one respondent elaborating, a feminazi is usually used against feminists as a defense mechanism for people who don't want to address issues presented by feminists. This aligns with secondary research stating that feminazi is a term used. So we can see here there's lots of really great synthesis language in this paragraph too. We've got a lot of qualitative data, but also some quantitative data too. So we've got that balance within our synthesis there as well. So read through that. That's your example paragraph. We've just done this one together. There's a fourth one here that I want you guys to look at, and I want you guys to color code it on your own. Okay, so that's your job now, or in a second actually, sorry, I got one more thing I want to talk to you about. That's what I want you to do after this video is done. Last thing I wanted to quickly chat about to you is just a bit more of synthesis and a bit more on analysis. Okay, so these guides here that you can see on these 2 pages, again, these are also in your Big Brain book as well, so you can feel free to annotate and use it from there as well. But this is again just a bit more information about what synthesis is, but we know it's putting all your information together to create new meaning and examining data and differences and interpreting them. But the main great thing about synthesis, or this scaffold here, is that I've given you a lot of exemplar statements of how you can show the marker that you're synthesizing. Because I think a lot of students know, yeah, I've got to synthesize my data, but I just don't know how to do it. Like, what's the explicit step? How do I say what I want to say? Like, you guys know what you want to say, but you don't know how to say it. These different examples can sort of help you. Okay, these are all different sentence starters. You'll notice that this says method 1, 2, and 3. The idea is that that represents the triangulation of data that I was talking about with our synthesis. And you can use these statements as ideas. Now, they're not the be-all and end-all, but definitely using these statements to help you synthesize your data. So for example, and you can sort of like mix and match them. So you might say, let's say you've made, I'll use the Disney princess example again. Let's say you've made a point that they objectify women, right? You might say, according to my questionnaire results, 81% of respondents agreed that Disney movies objectify women. When asked about, so you might link that with one of these, say this corresponds to, 53% of participants in my questionnaire who stated this. Then you might go, similarly, my content analysis reinforced, and you might show a picture of, Aladdin, where Jasmine is sort of trying to striptease Jafar to distract him, so using her body and being objectified by a man. And you might talk about that for a bit, okay? And then you might go, this parallels the assertions of sociologist Mr. Brown, who states that blah, 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 blah. So when using these, you can see how these sort of sentence starters can sort of prompt you with those synthesis statements that we can see. So if we look at this Disney princess, we'll look at the feminazi one because we didn't look at that much. If we look at these transition statements that we can see, this notion was reflected in my participant observation. All right. Notably, participants in my questionnaire state this, with one respondent elaborating, blah, blah, blah. These findings align with secondary research stating. So you can see that they've clearly used a lot of these sort of synthesis statements to get their point across, okay? So, and you guys can use and do the same thing too. So use these statements that are in here as examples, but also know that you can look here for some ideas and inspiration too. And that's similar with analysis, okay? So here I've broken down a bit more of what analysis looks like, but the main thing are the sentence starters that might assist you in framing your analysis. So for example, questionnaire participants were, so let's say you've done all your data and you've synthesized it, you now need to analyze it. So again, you're looking for the why behind things. Why does the data reveal this? Why do people take this perspective? Why have these particular trends, attitudes, or beliefs about Disney princesses and females in general been developed? Why did this interviewee make this particular comment? So you want to sort of unpack all those ideas into your analysis, okay? Some things you might also want to consider, do males respond differently to females in my questionnaire or interview? Were there differences between ethnicities? Did religious or non-religious people respond differently to certain questions? So you want to break down your own primary data as well as your secondary data as well. And here's some sentences that can kind of frame that. So you might say questionnaire participants were of various ages, backgrounds, and location. While most younger respondents indicated that Disney princesses they felt were experiencing equality, for example, older respondents tended to disagree because 90% of people stated no. Such a distinction in results could be due to factors such as younger respondents grew up in a period watching Disney films such as Moana, Frozen, which had more accurate and feminist representations of women, where they were depicted as strong, independent, not being reliant on men. Whereas older respondents grew up in the era of Snow White, Cinderella, Mulan, where all the female success was hinged on the idea of being attached to a male hero to save the day or rescue the damsel in distress. This leads me to believe that So you can see that analyzing your data, you can sort of plug in your content within these sentence starters and framing. So that might help you as well. So that's, I guess, it in terms of how to construct the OSAE method. Hope you found it helpful, and that's the thing that's really going to nail that top criteria. And if you do that, you're effectively applying social research methods, you're effectively integrating cultural terms. So if you follow that OSAE structure, it'll do wonders for you. And I hope that clarified a little bit of how you integrate change over time and cultural difference as well with those examples that you've seen here, okay, and how to do that quite explicitly, okay. Now, it's not to say that you have to, in every single sentence and every single point, refer to this all the time. That's not the case. When I mark it, or when in Year 12 a pit marker marks your report, we look at it holistically. So across the whole project, we should see it interwoven at various points throughout, Okay, it's not saying it has to be in every single sentence, because then, I mean, obviously that would probably read pretty poorly, but it has to just be integrated throughout. Anyway, hope that helped. Make sure you adhere to these guidelines as well. You don't plagiarize your work, you stick to the word limit, you've got the right font size, etc., and all that sort of stuff. Alright, but yeah, use those guides. As you're writing, have these open in front of you. Have them open. Like, don't set and forget these bad boys. They are really, really good resources, and you should use it to get an A. Alright? Alright. Adios.